The greatest empires are never forged solely by the sharpness of the sword, but by an invisible thread, a relentless, fragile chain of supply that binds them together across unforgiving lands. When we turn our gaze to the brutal Siege of Alesia in 52 BC, we witness a pinnacle of Roman engineering, double lines of fortification, walls built to defy nature itself, encircling a city in desperate defiance. Yet to grasp the true magnitude of this victory, we must look beyond the stone and examine the unseen battlefield where empires truly shatter, the agonizing failure of logistics that preceded the battle. This is a forensic examination of imperial overextension, a stark lesson etched deep into the mud, hunger, and broken supply lines. It is the chronicle of how distance transforms grand military strategy into devastating vulnerability. Our journey begins on the far side of the Great Rhine, where the immense, untamed territory of Gaul met the meticulously ordered demands of Roman administration. The legions, the instruments of Rome's expansion, were not simply fighting an enemy. They were a massive, hungry machine dependent on a precise flow of grain, weaponry, and manpower shipped across treacherous terrain. This dependency was the very bedrock of Roman power, but it simultaneously represented its most profound, hidden weakness. The initial directive for Julius Caesar was seemingly straightforward: subdue the tribes and secure the territory. But the execution of this ambition required an expenditure of resources that stretched the fragile arteries of communication to their absolute breaking point. Imagine the geography of the time: deep, sodden forests and winding rivers that offered no easy passage for the heavy grain convoys bound for the Gallic frontier. Every mile traveled was a gamble against unseen dangers, hostile tribes, treacherous ambushers, and the merciless, unforgiving geography itself. The logistical commitment required to sustain these armies was staggering. To keep legions marching hundreds of miles from established depots demanded an infrastructure that was constantly under existential threat. Men were not just fighting, they were living on borrowed time, their very survival dictated by the speed, security, and integrity of the supply trains crossing hostile lands. If a convoy was delayed by a raiding party, if a vital crossing was lost to ambush in the dark woods, the consequence was not merely temporary hunger. It was the immediate, catastrophic strategic paralysis of an entire legion. The true antagonist in this theater was rarely Vercingetorix's spears or the formidable walls of Alesia. The genuine enemy that dictated Roman success or failure was distance itself, the cold, mathematical reality that defined how much Rome could actually hold, how many men it could feed, and precisely how long its boundless ambition could sustain itself against the entropy of time and chaos. As Caesar's forces pushed deeper into Gaul, the supply chain devolved into a living entity defined entirely by scarcity. Picture the visual motif: vast, empty plains punctuated only by hastily dug latrines, and fields sown with meager, desperate crops. The supply lines were exposed arteries running across hostile lands, vulnerable to raids that inflicted damage far greater than physical loss. They bred psychological dread and demoralization in the ranks. This strain reached a critical threshold as the preparations for the Siege of Alesia intensified. While the Romans had successfully encircled the Gallic capital, maintaining that perimeter required an even more staggering expenditure of resources. They erected double lines of fortification, the inner circumvallation facing inward to keep the enemy contained, and the outer contravallation facing outward against inevitable assault. These were not mere defensive structures. They were immense, logistical anchors demanding constant replenishment of timber, pitch, grain stores, and specialized engineering materials simply to remain standing. The dilemma became agonizingly acute. How could legions effectively feed themselves while simultaneously defending an imminent Gallic assault on their flanks? The vast reservoirs of manpower and material required for constructing these enormous walls had to be diverted away from frontline combat. Every cohort sent to repair a breach in the rampart was a cohort less capable of engaging the enemy beyond it, a strategic deficit masked by brute engineering. The failure did not unfold in one decisive battle. It eroded slowly through the corrosive process of entropy. When supply lines falter, morale degrades faster than fear can be suppressed. The Roman soldiers at Alesia were enduring a calculated starvation, acutely aware that every passing day meant relying on dwindling caches and the agonizing stretch of their own reserves. They faced not just the determined spears of Gallic warriors, but the invisible weight of imperial overextension pressing down upon their shoulders. The walls themselves became monuments to this profound logistical strain. The ramparts were built not solely against an external attack, but against internal collapse, a desperate, massive attempt to create an impermeable bubble against a reality that was slowly starving them from within. The ingenuity displayed in constructing those colossal defenses speaks louder than any battle report. It demonstrates a strategic mind forced into extraordinary feats of compensation for physical deficiency. The final resolution achieved at Alesia, while ultimately a military triumph for Rome, remains a bitter testament to the true price of empire. Victory was secured, but the cost was tallied not only in Gallic blood, but in the unsustainable strain placed upon the imperial machine itself. The lesson etched into those muddy slopes is profound. Even the mightiest legions are ultimately tethered by the immutable limitations of physics and logistics. The shadow cast by that siege reveals a stark, timeless truth for history. When imperial expansion outstrips the capacity to sustain it, the magnificent architecture of an empire is revealed to be nothing more than a hollow shell built upon the shifting sands of unsustainable demand. The weight of distance, once ignored in the pursuit of conquest, finally became the inescapable, crushing force that dictated the ultimate fate of Rome and Gaul. And this lesson, etched into the memory of those who built and those who suffered, echoes across millennia. It is the fundamental paradox of dominion, that the grandest declarations of power are often undermined by the mundane, inescapable reality of carrying weight from one place to another. The architecture of empire, regardless of its material splendor, is ultimately a system of calculated risk, balancing ambition against entropy. Consider the subsequent empires, those that claimed dominion over territories seemingly vast and limitless, and observe how quickly their foundations were tested not by foreign armies, but by the very arteries that supplied them. The invisible chain, once seen as an abstract concept in theory, becomes brutally tangible when examined under the harsh light of history. It reveals itself to be the single, most fragile element holding any vast structure together. For every mile conquered and every province annexed, there lies an exponential increase in vulnerability, a multiplying demand that strains the limits of human organization and material feasibility. The true measure of an empire is not the distance it can conquer, but the sustainability of the infrastructure required to simply exist within that conquest. It is in this logistical reality, beneath the dust of forgotten campaigns and crumbling monuments, that we find the truest chronicle of power, a story less about glorious victory and more about the brutal mathematics of survival.